Economic development, green revolution, land reform, social movements, environmentalist movements, Election Commission of India, Control General, National Human Rights Commission, National Commission for Women, National Commission for SC, and OBC, UPSC, Finance Commission, Grassroots Democracy, Looking for Human Constitution, 2003. Preamble, Judicial Review, Fundamental Rights, Fundamental Duties, Principal Authority of Union Government, Political Parties and Interest Groups, Electoral Behavior, State and Comparative Perspective, Federalism, Nationalism, Role of Party, Political Strategies. Okay. Socialist pattern of planning, Nehruvian rate of growth, forex reserve, minority farming, planning and economic development, Nehruvian and Gandhian perspective, the role of planning in public sector, green revolution, land reforms and agrarian revolution, liberalization and economic reforms. Okay. Working the important topics. Nehruvian socialism and secularism, central planning versus federalism, decentralized government planning, political dimensions, central management, administration, economic liberalization, new economic policy, democracy and development, uneven development among states, green revolution, sustainable, second green revolution, political fallout, Gandhian perspective, development, Niti Aayog, politics of economic growth, land reforms. Okay. Paper 1, Part A, liberalization and economic reform. This is Part B, right? Economic situation before the reforms. By beginning of 1990s, India was facing a tough economic situation characterized by double-digit inflation, gross fixed deficit, internal debt close to 54%, forex reserve just enough to cover import bills of 14 days. India was growing at a rate less than 3.5%, which got to be known as Hindu rate of growth. Less than 3.5%. However, some new liberal rightist scholars use the term Nehruvian rate of growth. India was facing balance of payment crisis in 1991. The Indian economic model could attract a limited foreign investment because in 60% of the cases investment needed government approval. Political situations before the reforms. India was witnessing a series of minority government at the center. Strong government with political stability was economic assistance by foreign investors. The decade of 1990s was characterized by 3 M's. Mandal Mandir marking. There were internal opposition also within the ruling party, especially within the Congress, Nehruvian versus capitalist or liberal. Then there was opposition from Indian business houses who were not ready to accept open competition from outside, Bilas, Tatas, etc. International situations before the reforms. The transnational multilateral agencies such as IMF, World Bank brought enormous pressure on the Indian government to pursue a policy of liberalization. Any kind of economic assistance came with conditionalities which required structural changes in India's economic and administrative model. The collapse of socialist regime in USSR was considered as the victory of market forces. In his book, The End of History, and last month, Francis Fukuyama declared the end of history. He declared that mankind has achieved the last stage of ideological evolution and the world will remain as unipolar. The country was facing an acute economic crisis triggered by Iraq's offensives on Kuwait. Due to this, the crude oil price Crude oil prices doubled after India being an importer faced this tough economic situation. India had to mortgage around 70 tons of gold reserve for $600 million. It was a China situation for India. There is no alternate option. What was liberalization? 24 July 1991, PM PV Narasimha Rao. On 21st July 1991, the then Finance Minister Manmohan Singh started his budget speech by quoting French poet Victor Hugo. He said, "No one can stop an idea whose time has come." Manmohan Singh was referring to the idea of liberalizing Indian economy. Liberalization basically means removal of control and regulations at various levels of the economy, thereby facilitating the market forces to determine its course of direction. The Indian government took following measures to liberalize the economy. Trade policy reforms. These reforms were aimed at dismantling the import licensing system. It proposed scaling down of import duties from 300% to 50%. Okay. Industrial policy reform. It saw abolition of industrial licensing except few specified industries reserved for public sector. Exchange rate reforms. The rupee was devalued in 1991, first by 16% and then by 6%. Capital market reform. The SEBI, which was already established in 1988 as an executive body, was given statutory status through SEBI Act of 1992. Financial reform. Private sector banks, including foreign joint ventures, came to be permitted in India to establish and expand their operations. Manmohan Singh concluded his budget speech with a declaration: "Let the whole world hear it loud and clear. India is now awake. We shall prevail. We shall prevail." Come. Analysis of the past reform situation in India. The situation of economy today. GDP of India increased from $1512 billion in 1991 to $3.5 trillion in 2021. Besides, the average annual growth rate in GDP after 1990 is around 6.25% due to increase in the share of services in GDP. There is less volatility in the GDP growth rate. The coefficient of variation in the annual growth rate of GDP has declined from 80% during 61 to 90 to just 30% from 1991 to 2020. Rates of inflation. The average annual rates of inflation in the first post-reform period were significantly closer at around 5%, and the gross fiscal deficit has remained below 4.8% of the GDP. Maximum is 6%. Right? RBI needs to maintain inflation under 6%. And fiscal deficit money. Abolition of license Raj. India has rapidly emerged as a preferred destination for foreign investments in last 2 decades. FDI inflow has increased 20-fold. In 1990s, it was around $337 million. It has increased to $84 billion in 2021-22. There has been significant growth in the forex reserves, which is now sufficient to cover 15 months of imports. It is around $8. In India, poverty has fallen from around 60% to just 10% according to International Poverty Line. Yet, a proper assessment of 1991 reforms must go beyond numbers. Perhaps the biggest contribution to the reforms was change in India's economic system. The reforms has resulted into increased private sector participation, resulting into public-private partnership model of economy. It has resulted into large vocal middle class, thereby bringing parallel social and political changes. Challenges that have emerged post-reforms. Opening of the economy has exposed it. Within few years after the reforms, the Indian economy faced severe series of challenges emerging outside India. Example: dot-com bubble, global financial crisis 2008, and COVID-19 crisis. A major criticism about the reforms have been that it had widened the gap between rich and poor. The World Bank estimates show that the Gini index of India has increased from 31% in 1993 to 36% in 2015. हजुर पढ्दैछु अँ, ल ल
লটারি জেতা তৎক্ষণাৎ লোন পাওয়া বাড়ি বসে টাকা পয়সা
हेलो मस्त तिनमा छैन रे नि ए हुन्छ 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 Thomas Piketty blames the politics of economic liberalization across the world since 1980s for their inequality. Concludes that inequality is not inevitable but a political choice. He suggests that governments should tax the rich and redistribute the wealth among poor. However, the World Inequality Report 2022 claims that inequality is decreasing since 1980. The contemporary global inequalities are close to early 20th century when Western imperialism was at its peak. India is experiencing a jobless growth in the reform years. A study by ILO claims that India's remarkable GDP growth has been mostly a jobless one. Liberalism impact on female jobs is not encouraging. The labor force participation ratio in India is around 23% according to study. Will market competition trump gender discrimination in India? India's economic liberalization has increased market competition has not eliminated the gender discrimination. In fact, Indian gender balance in the economic sphere remains lowest in the world. Following the liberalization, the manufacturing base in India has not expanded substantially. Observations by scholars of past reform effect on post-reform effects on Indian economy. Atul Kohali, Politics of Economic Liberalization in India. Attempts at liberalizing Indian economy has given a mixed record. While the government remains committed to liberalizing Indian economy, the momentum has slowed down because of pressure of electoral politics and populist economic program, which has been simultaneously adopted. It appears that the marriage of political and economic liberalization may not be easy in a country like India. There has been upward income mobility for higher income class across the nation, but it has failed to deliver a parallel social mobility among the vulnerable sections of society. This period strengthening of state capital private business alliance, strengthening of state capital private business alliance at the cost of pre-existing social and economic protection. According to Raghuram Rajan, in last 3 decades, India has never embraced the reforms. India may be growing faster than its peers, but that amounts to little more than being one-eyed king in the land of lions. According to Raghuram Rajan, in last 3 decades, India has never embraced the reforms. India may be growing faster than its peers, but India may be growing faster than its peers, but that amount to little more than being one-eyed king in the land of blinds. Okay. Swami Swaminathan Iyer. India's 20 years delay in going for economic reform has resulted into a humanitarian nightmare because of its non-inclusive approach. Prabhat Patnaik. Liberalization has been challenged by Prabhat Patnaik from Marxist perspective. According to him, the reforms were against the constitutional mandate wherein preamble declares India as a socialist country. Liberalization, according to him, is not just the policy option, rather a major episode in the history of class struggle in India. According to him, this will result into new class configurations within India, and its effect on Indian capital will be twofold. It will shift capital from workers, peasants, and small businessmen towards large capitalists within India. It will shift the balance away from domestic capital towards foreign capital. Way forward, according to a report of OECD, in it together, while class inequality benefits all. Greater role for women in the economy to remove the barriers from female employment. This is in line with the provisions of Article 38(2), which talks about minimizing income inequalities, adequately designed redistribution via taxes, employment promotion, and good quality jobs through skilling. In his book Confessions of a Swadeshi Reformers, former Union Foreign Yashwant Sinha, Finance Minister Yashwant Sinha cautious against the interference from government in economy. He quotes American philosopher John Santayana, who says that those who forget history are doomed to repeat it. According to former Prime Minister Dr. Manmohan Singh, the road ahead is even more challenging than in 1991, and the nation would have to recalibrate its priorities to ensure a dignified life to all Indians. The country needs to handle this crisis situation by going for liberalization 2.0. The quote Robert Firstborn and miles to go before I sleep. What explains Indians' modest improvement in social development outcome even as the rate of growth has accelerated since 20 has not been accompanied with adequate reforms government. In the post-liberation era, Indian politics is moving from ascriptive politics to developmental politics. Discuss economic liberalization and unemployment development among Union states. Okay. Nehruvian and Gandhian perspective. Compare the Nehruvian and Gandhian models of development. Situations in 1947. After the end of Mughal era, India's GDP accounted for about 32% of world GDP. In 1947, Indian GDP was reduced to just rupees 2.7 lakh crore. At that time, around 51% of Indian GDP was coming from agri sector, which was dependent on monsoon. India was suffering with hunger, poverty, and stagnation. The two homogenic voices after India's independence were of Gandhi and Nehru. Gandhi was a critic of Western model of development based on consumerism. According to him, the economic model that India will adopt should have its root in Indian culture and it should cater to the unique requirements of India. Although not an economist, his vision of developmental can be found in his book Hind Swaraj, where he has emphasized on non-violence and purity of means. Gandhi criticizes the Western model of development for excessive emphasis on materialism. According to Bhikkhu Parekh in his book Gandhi's Political Philosophy, Gandhi's critique was against the Western culture, which was maintained by massive violence, mastery, domination, and subjugation. According to him, the Gandhian model is based on the principle of Sarvodaya and village economy. It was characterized by following three pillars: economic growth, social justice, and morality. According to B.R. Ambedkar, a socialist just society is one in which there is increasing sense of reverence and decreasing sense of contempt. Suchaman, according to him, in his book Small is Beautiful, calls Gandhi as the greatest people's economy. Suchaman identified that Gandhi's economic thinking was compatible with spirituality. According to him, Gandhi refused to treat economics as if people didn't matter. For Gandhi, no economics was any good that didn't make sense in terms of morality. For Gandhi, economics and ethics were not separate. Okay. He identified the five main pillars of Gandhian economic thinking: non-violence. According to Gandhi, modern urban-based industrial civilization is exploitative and violent. Here we can draw similarity with Rousseau, who in his book The Social Contract calls the original man instead of nature as noble savage. For Rousseau, modern civilization and science created man a depraved animal. Simple. Gandhi favors a minimalist way of life. Small. Instead of mass production, Gandhi favors production by masses. Capital saving. Gandhi firmly believed that capital intensive economy can never solve India's unemployment problem. Yes. Rural based. This idea of Gandhi is reflected in Article 40 of Indian Constitution, which talks about the organization of village panchayats. According to B.N. Ghosh in his book Gandhian Political Economy, there are five objectives behind Gandhian schemes of holistic development: human development, which includes moral development; balance between manual and intellectual labor, which will develop body, mind, and soul; development of social justice, rights, and freedoms; attainment of self-reliance through rural development; reduction in poverty. Trusteeship model. Gandhi talked about the trusteeship model for transforming the capitalist order of the society into an egalitarian one. Capitalists were not free to use their wealth for selfish satisfaction. They are just the caretakers for the property for common good. Capitalists order of society into egalitarian and according to his model, capitalists were not free to use their wealth for selfish satisfaction. They are just caretakers of the property for common good. Comparison between Nehruvian and Gandhian perspective on development. Type of industrialization. Gandhian model was based on small-scale basic industries rather than heavy industrialization. Gandhi believed that mechanized production always results in the accumulation of surplus and concentration of wealth. In fact, Gandhi was in direct opposition to any kind of mass production. In Young India 1931, Gandhi wrote, Industrialism is going to be a curse for mankind. Again in 1936, he wrote in Harijan that industrialization on a mass scale will lead to active exploitation of the villages. However, at certain instances, Gandhi agreed that heavy industries need to be centralized and nationalized. However, the major economic activities should happen in villages only. Nehru agreed with the first part of the suggestion but disagreed with the later. Gandhi believed that the value of industry should be judged not by the dividend it pays, rather its effect on the soul and spirit of the workers. Okay. Unlike Gandhi, Nehru favored heavy and rapid industrialization, which will promote capital formation and self-sufficiency. Nehru rejected the priority for consumer industries over capital industries. According to Nehru, self-sufficiency will result into autonomy in other fields like foreign policy. Yes. On villages, Gandhi talks about a decentralized economy. For him, rebuilding villages is a prerequisite for India's economic development. Gandhi says that if village perishes, then India will perish too. Gandhi talks about oceanic circle of power and village republic. Oceanic circle of power and village republic. According to him, cities have so far exploited the villages, and this has resulted into the rise into various economic indicators of villages and cities. However, modern economists like Nehru called Gandhi's vision of Gram Swaraj as retrograde. On one hand, being a Gandhian, Nehru strongly believed in the betterment of rural economy, but on the other hand, he felt that heavy industrial development would be best way to serve India's economic interests and therefore ultimately achieve Gandhi's objective. On socialism, it was not that Gandhi disliked socialism, but he was against the use of force by the state that socialism demanded. Gandhi talked about social justice. For him, development of individuals and the development of society were not separate and was in line with his concepts of Sarvodaya. On the other hand, Nehruvian model was based on Nehru's belief in socialism and got materialized state-led socialism. Nehru was influenced by development in USSR and China. He always considered the economic problem as the most important challenge that India was facing. He strongly believed that a perfect economic system based on state-led socialism will solve all other problems of India. The Nehruvian model. On the role of state in economic development. On the role of state in economic development. Gandhi is considered as a moral anarchist. He believed in a stateless society. For him, state is a violence on people's consciousness. Nehru was a firm believer in the state control over the economic sector. His policy decisions like land reforms, 5-year plans, a significant role of state. While Gandhi talked about self-realized individual responsibility when he put forth his trusteeship model, Nehru created a state-led mechanism forcing individuals and businessmen to follow a static, determined planning process. On use of technology for economic development, according to Gandhi, technology is a violence against the dignity of human beings. He says, in modern times, a human being has become more mere part of machine. I want every individual to become a full-blooded member of this society. For Nehru, science and technology were major tools to solve the economic problems of India. Therefore, we see emphasis on technology in policy initiatives of Nehru. Example, opening of IIT, setting up ISRO, creation of various dams and multi-purpose projects. He called them as the temple of modern India. On the protection of environment, according to Gandhi, nature provides enough for our needs and not enough for our greeds. Therefore, not for anyone, not enough for anyone's good. Therefore, he opposes exploitation of nature through massive technological progress and uncontrolled consumerism. Gandhi favors sustainable development, which is against the Western model of development. This is again in contrast with Nehru's view of development at the grand scale. On nuclear technology, Gandhi believed that the nuclear technology is the most satanic invention by mankind. After the Hiroshima and Nagasaki nuclear bombing, Gandhi said, unless now the world adopts non-violence, it will spell suicide for mankind. Even Nehru was not in favor of nuclear weapons, but he considered economic development through nuclear energy. On the question of investment in Indian economy, Gandhi was against any kind of capital investment. According to him, capital investment results into the creation of a surplus. Nehru, on the other hand, had a view on the investment. He favored investment from Indian business houses rather than the foreign investment. He believed that the foreign investment will compromise India's sovereignty at the international level. Both leaders were concerned about India's economic development, which was their common objective. However, they adopted different means. Nehru was influenced by the Western education. Gandhi was being guided by the spiritual masters in his dharma. For Gandhi, freedom comes from within, but Nehru believed that economic freedom is a prerequisite for political freedom. Although criticized by the free market economies, Gandhi's ideas on economic development represent an alternative to mainstream economic ideologies. Gandhi preferred raising standard of life rather than standard of living. Today, when we talk about sustainable development, we find that ideas of Gandhi are still relevant. According to Martin Luther King, Gandhi is inevitable. If humanity wants to progress, it is must. We may ignore Gandhi at our own risk. In present times, ideas of both Nehru and Gandhi are relevant in the context of Indian economy. This is also in line with the economic decisions of the present government, which talks about Atmanirbhar Bharat, aligned with Nehruvian model, and support for local product, vocal for local, which aligns with Gandhian philosophy. Green Revolution. Never underestimate the little farmer's capacity to change. Norman Boyle. Genesis of Green Revolution. The term Green Revolution refers to the new agricultural technologies developed during the 1950s and 1960s by a team of agricultural experts at International Center for Maize and Wheat Improvement in Mexico and International Rice Research Institute in Philippines. Maize and Wheat in Mexico and rice in Philippines. The technology was soon adopted by countries from Asia and Latin America. Organizations like Rockefeller Foundation and Ford Foundation were responsible for the spread of Green Revolution. Dr. Norman Boyle was given Nobel Peace Prize in 1970 for his contribution to agriculture development in solving world's food problem. Green Revolution in context to India, the agriculture sector employs around 58% of the Indian population and therefore has a higher multiplier effect. According to developmental economist Arthur C. Lewis, underdeveloped economies and developing economies like India can increase the level of income by increasing the efficiency of agricultural production. What conditions led to the Green Revolution in India? The first five-year plan kept agriculture at its core. Despite this, India faced severe food shortage during the second five-year plan. During 1965 to 66, India faced consecutive drought, which led to the drop in food production by 36% in 2 years. Economists Paul and William Paddock argue that India is falling into a Malthusian trap. In their book Famine 1975, America's Decision, Who Will Survive? Paddock brother talks about the India's population, which was disappropriately higher than the food grain production in India. They classified India into hopeless countries and suggested America to stop any kind of food aid to such countries. According to them, sending food grains to these hopeless countries is like throwing sandbags in the ocean. Instead, they suggested to concentrate on the other parts of the world. Similar observation was made by Paul R. English in his book The Population Bomb. India signed an agreement with USA called Public Law 480. It was not just humiliating, rather a strategic mistake during the Cold War. To deal with this problem, a team of experts from U.S. Department of Agriculture under S.E. Johnson suggested measures in their report titled India's Food Problem in Steps to Meet It 1959. The major suggestion was that India should focus more on those areas where the potential for raising agricultural productivity was high. As a result, Government of India selected few areas which were already somewhat developed like Punjab, Haryana and Western UP. During 1960, Government launched two major programs. Intensive Agriculture Area Program 1961, Intensive Agriculture District Program, Inclusive Agriculture Area Program, Inclusive Agriculture District Program. 1961-1964. What was Green Revolution? Green Revolution was a period that began in 1960s during which agriculture in India was converted into a modern agricultural industry by adapting high-yield varieties of seeds, fertilizers, pesticides, irrigation, infrastructure and farm mechanization, etc. Impact of Green Revolution positives. There was increase in the production of food grains, especially wheat and rice. The Green Revolution turned India from beginning bowl to green bowl. The cereals production was increased due to three factors. Increase in net area under cultivation, multiple cropping, use of high yield varieties of seeds. The production of food grain increased from 72 in 1900 65, 60, 30, 132 and in 1978. According to Ministry of Agriculture, the agriculture sector recently registered a growth rate of 3.4% in 2022 and the overall economic growth had declined from 7.2%. Employment generation. Green Revolution increased the aggregate level of employment by raising cropping industry intensity, farm productivity and multiple cropping. India also witnessed this phenomena of migration of workers from non-green revolution areas to Punjab, Haryana and Western UP. Investment in both public and private in agriculture increased, efficient use of land, increase in non-farm activities. Negatives. Although considered as a success, Green Revolution resulted in a disbalanced development which was focused only on limited states like Punjab, Haryana, Western UP, while it resulted into a culture of affluence. In such states, the non-green revolution states suffered with problems like farmers who died. There were negative impacts on the environment as well. Decline in soil fertility, loss of biodiversity, depletion of groundwater resources, overcapitalization in agriculture. Analysis and politics of Green Revolution. No matter how good the science, the Green Revolution depends on people. Wheat is not political. Politics of Cold War. Green Revolution has a capitalist approach towards agriculture. It promoted capital-intense industrial agriculture. It was more of a Cold War strategy than humanitarian initiative. After 1947, the Communist Party was the only challenge of the hegemony of Congress. The politics of Nehru, like land reforms, were socialist in nature, and therefore, in this context, US government promoted Green Revolution preempt a Soviet-style Red Revolution. Impact on Indian National Congress. After 1947, the political power in India was monopolized by Indian National Congress. However, in 1970s, 80s, because of Green Revolution, the hegemony of Congress declined and there was a breakdown of the Congress system. Political parties based on identities of backward castes involved in agriculture emerged. Their parties capitalized on the growing income because of Green Revolution and challenged the elite-dominated Congress party. Rudolph and Rudolph, in their book In Pursuit of Lakshmi, observed that in Indian context, state is an important third actor beside has and has not. No political or economic change is possible without the involvement of Indian state. Green Revolution is one such example. They have analyzed the political effect of Green Revolution as it gave rise to bloc capitalism. This strengthened the debate of role of caste in the Indian politics and gave rise to regional parties. Vandana Siva, in her book Volumes of Green Revolution, talks about the negative impacts of Green Revolution on the environment. It caused greater environmental, financial, and social problems like drought, income inequalities, and farmer suicide. Francine R. Funkil, in her book Indian Green Revolution, talks about the emergence of Naxalite movements and how the failure of land reforms resulted in the emergence of Naxalite movement in India. According to a report from MHA titled Causes and Nature of Agrarian Tensions, prepared in 1969, also held that Green Revolution in the absence of land reforms led to the emergence of Naxalite movement, technological changes and political turnover, the democratizing effects of the Green Revolution in India. Aditya Das Gupta, according to him, Green Revolution was influential in the rise of agrarian opposition parties in 1970s, which led to the decline of Congress. In between 1957 and 1987, the electoral outcome showed statistical consistency with the increase in number of districts coming under high-yielding varieties of states. The political representation of Congress steadily declines. There was a parallel increase in the representation of regional parties. It caused this as a political disruption, ultimately resulting in the deepening of democracy in India. According to Das Gupta, there were three channels through Green Revolution generated these changes. It provided wealth to farmers from lower and intermediate castes who were still now politically excluded. It intensified farmers' dependence on government subsidies, therefore created a strong incentive for farmers to seek political representation. Increased production due to Green Revolution brought the crop price down, therefore creating a cause for collective political action. Thus, Green Revolution remained an unfinished task. According to Marxist economist Utsav Patnaik, Green Revolution remained just a technocratic fix because the land ownership was vastly unequal in India. The result of Green Revolution has also remained asymmetric. As per Uma Kapila, the Green Revolution was only a wheat revolution. The technology was limited, the geography to which it was applied was limited, the crop in focus were limited, and therefore farmers who are benefited also remains limited. Does India require Green Revolution 2.0? The economic survey since 2011 have demanded Green Revolution 2.0. Indian agriculture requires more capital investment. Farmer must go negotiation price, private-public partnership should be promoted. The second Green Revolution will focus on the eastern part of the country, especially the northeastern part of India. There is a need to move from chemical fertilizers towards organic manure. There is a need to diversify food grains, going beyond wheat and rice. Conclusion: the Green Revolution remains a major technological. हेलो
आएन म
हुन्छ कति टाइम लाग्छ
आइहालेँ माथिबाट म झरिसकेँ नि
ल त्यसो भए म आएको
ल